Hot take. Why America shouldn't pull troops from Afghanistan right now. Hot take. Let's check it out.
If you've heard the news that Biden plans to pull all American troops out of Afghanistan by September 11th of this year, you were probably pretty happy to hear that news. I was when I first heard about it.
I was pretty unhappy to hear that news, actually, because I'm someone who isn't a fucking moron who doesn't pay any attention to anything. His idea, obviously the idea here, is that if the US withdraws, immediately the Taliban takes over. That's also kind of bullshit, right? The Taliban is 20,000, 30,000 strong in terms of fighters. That's a very high estimate. Some are 10,000. The US has 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, okay? The Afghan army has 200,000 troops. So this idea here that the US is the only bulwark holding the Taliban back is fucking patently absurd. Even if we go to, like, for example, Radio Free Asia. You know, the Taliban controls lots of land, okay? The Taliban controls lots of land. This orange part, these oranges are the contested zones, right? Taliban control is here, and contested zones are here. But what people look at, right? They look at maps like this and they say, oh, the Taliban controls lots of land, blah, blah, blah. But this is like random rural areas, okay? They control a couple of big cities, relatively big cities, and that's where most of their population comes from. But if you look at the actual population down here, am I blocking it? Yeah, I am. If you look at the actual, oops, that's not what I meant to move. If you look at the actual population down here, right? What do you see? Well, the Afghan government has control of obviously most of the population. Well, not a complete majority if we count the contested areas, but way more than the Taliban, right? So they control much more valuable sorts of areas, at least in terms of human capital. So this idea that the Taliban is some sort of basically on the brink of invading fucking Kabul tomorrow, you know, they're instantly going to storm in and take over if 2,500 US troops leave is fucking absurd, right? For one, they couldn't do it, okay? Because US troops leaving does not mean that foreign support for the Afghan military in terms of economics, in terms of arms imports, you know, is gone, right? Obviously not. So it's just it's bullshit framing. The Afghan military are the ones who are doing most of the fighting already. For two, it's assuming that the Taliban have no interest in peace at all, okay? Which is, again, complete bullshit framing. Because the Taliban would not be attending fucking arduous peace talks in third-party nations and agreeing, signing the fucking shaking the fucking hands of negotiators. Like, there's a photo, I'll show you. Everyone wants peace, okay? Everyone wants peace, no matter what. Even the Taliban wants peace, and they're willing to give up something for it, okay? What would that something be? Probably their singular control over the areas that they currently hold. Women's rights is a big point. Voting is a big point, etc. Deals like this have been made all over the world, such as in Colombia most recently, for example, with integrating the FARC into the government. So what is going to happen here, or what would have happened if fucking Joe Biden didn't move the withdrawal until September and essentially ruin the peace deal that was already sort of in process with the Taliban, is that there would be further talks between the Taliban and the Afghan government post-withdrawal of these essentially very small numbers of US troops to agree on what things are going to look like to achieve peace, right? And it would probably be something like amnesty for the Taliban, as I just showed that most people want. It would also probably be integrating the Taliban into the government in some form, which would probably mean giving them seats in parliament, like having them form a legitimate political party, and obviously not compromising with them on things. The Taliban is not in a good negotiating position for certain things, right? They're not in a good negotiating position for abolishing democracy, for one. They have none of the leeway for that people think they do. They control, in terms of population, a quarter of the territory that the government does. They have a tenth of the manpower, far worse armaments, etc. Right? We're not talking about, you know, an Islamic fundamentalist movement that is in a dominating position on the negotiating table. Okay. So there's no way that they could possibly, unless they literally said, we're not going to agree on this, then there wouldn't be an agreement, okay? Right, and in that case, we can talk about like foreign support coming back in to fight the Taliban, because foreigners leaving doesn't mean the Taliban are going to take over fucking immediately, okay? They have no position to argue for like their wants for women's rights being implemented. They're in no position to argue for the abolition of democracy, etc. in peace talks, nor could they possibly, in any reasonable view of the situation, take over and just implement their will on everyone, okay? These people are just spreading absolute hysteria. They're relying on the fact that the audience wants to believe that the Taliban can do all of these things, kind of, because they want to justify continued US imperialism in Afghanistan. So it's essentially taking advantage of an ignorant audience who doesn't want to know anything about the issue, doesn't care about it, to say that, you know, we need to stay here because if we leave, the Taliban is going to take over. And that's just leaving out every single little thing about the peace deal, leaving out all the details, especially the fact that the US violated it by moving the withdrawal to September, and leaving out the fact that no one wants the Taliban to take over, which is why no one's going to let them take over, okay? It's not going to happen. It's not a realistic thing to be afraid of. And, you know, they would have to make far more compromises in any sort of peace negotiations than the other side would. Far more. And, you know, obviously they are willing to make these compromises, or they wouldn't have ever come to these bilateral negotiations on the issue. They would never have agreed to a deal with Trump, etc. See, he's dishonestly framing this as so he goes, one, the Taliban is terrible, hates women, they're awful on women's rights. Two, most Afghans don't want to compromise on women's rights. Three, this means that therefore if the US leaves, the Taliban will take over. Therefore, if you support the US leaving, you support the Taliban taking over and doing all these bad things. When, as I just kind of explained, that's incredibly bullshit, dishonest framing. It's the sort of thing that like a neocon in Washington would do. Just total bullshit. They're also in a terrible position, so whatever concessions they get, they're not going to be the super important ones, like democracy, like compromising so-called democracy and compromising women's rights. Right? They're probably going to be shit that, if we're being honest, most Afghans probably agree with, because it is, again, an incredibly conservative Islamic country.
I don't think the right thing to do is for us to pull out right now. We are not guaranteed at this point for the people of Afghanistan to not have to endure more rule by the Taliban again. Both options suck. This idea that the US pulls out literally just 2,500 troops and the Taliban takes over immediately, it's complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit framing. It's honestly, this guy should just go and work for the fucking State Department. Go work for the Department of Defense, dude. You would be welcomed with open arms. You know, you're just spouting their talking points verbatim. So this idea that the Taliban is some sort of basically on the brink of invading fucking Kabul tomorrow, you know, they're instantly going to storm in and take over if 2,500 US troops leave, is fucking absurd, right?